Pigeon blood rubies, less than 1% of all rubies, worth over $300,000 per carat, were supposed to be banned from America to starve Myanmar's brutal military junta. Instead, a black market flourished, laundering blood rubies into luxury cases on Fifth Avenue. The money still funds violence, and almost no buyer can tell the difference. So how did a well-intentioned ban backfire, and why are these gems still slipping through America's fingers? In the world of precious stones, few names carry the same weight as the pigeon blood ruby. This is not just any red gem. To qualify, a ruby must display an electric, almost glowing red, so pure and vivid that even experts struggle to describe it in ordinary terms. The color is legendary, a red with a subtle blue undertone, a depth that seems to burn from within. Less than 1% of all rubies ever pulled from the earth meet this standard. The rest, no matter how beautiful, simply do not compare. Gem historians trace the term pigeon blood back centuries to the royal courts of Burma, now Myanmar. There, these stones were seen as gifts from the gods, symbols of power, protection, and untouchable status. Burmese kings demanded the finest rubies as tribute. Warriors believed a pigeon blood ruby sewn into their flesh would make them invincible. Even today, collectors and connoisseurs speak of these gems with a kind of reverence reserved for the rarest works of art. The science behind the allure is just as remarkable. The Mogok Valley, hidden in the mountains of central Myanmar, sits atop a unique geological formation. Here, extreme heat and pressure, over millions of years, created rubies with a chemical fingerprint found nowhere else. The chromium that gives Mogok rubies their color also produces a natural fluorescence, so when light hits the stone, it seems to glow, almost as if alive. No synthetic treatment, no modern technology can truly duplicate this effect. Auction houses in Geneva and Hong Kong have watched these stones break records again and again. In 2015, a 25-carat Burmese pigeon blood ruby sold for over $30 million. Smaller stones, if certified untreated and from Mogok, routinely fetch more than $300,000 per carat, outpacing even flawless diamonds. The world's top luxury brands compete for the chance to acquire just a handful each year. For investors, the right ruby is a trophy and a fortress of value, immune to market swings and fashion's whims. A gem historian puts it simply: a true pigeon blood ruby is the rarest of the rare. It is the king of gems. But the story of these stones is not just about beauty or value. It is about the lengths people will go to possess them, and the secrets buried deep beneath their surface. Their allure is magnetic, undeniable, a temptation that has shaped destinies, toppled rulers, and, as we will see, drawn the world into a shadowy struggle for control. Mogok's legendary rubies come at a staggering human cost. Control of the valley's mines lies almost entirely in the hands of Myanmar's military, funneled through two powerful conglomerates, Myanmar Economic Holdings Limited and Myanmar Economic Corporation. These companies, run by senior generals, hold more than 80% of all mining licenses in the region. Every stone that leaves Mogok fills the regime's coffers, funding the machinery of repression, not the lives of local people. For the miners themselves, the conditions are brutal. Reports from Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch document a grim reality: forced labor, armed guards, and violence as a tool of control. In August 2016, at the Carat mine, over 300 villagers were rounded up by soldiers and forced to dig for rubies under threat of violence. They worked long hours without pay, watched by men with guns. When some tried to resist, 2 were shot dead. 3 more were seriously injured. Hospital records, eyewitness accounts, and satellite images confirm the military's direct presence at the site. Children as young as 12 were among those forced to work. this is not an isolated story. In January 2019, workers at the Mokbok mine tried to organize for better conditions. Military security forces responded with gunfire, killing 1 and injuring 8. The mine, like most in Mogok, was controlled by the military's business arm. Across the region, satellite imagery shows a steady expansion of mining operations after the U.S. sanctions, as civilian plots disappeared and military-controlled sites grew. Entire villages have been razed, their land seized for new pits. Those who protest face arrest, torture, or simply vanish without a trace. The profits from this monopoly are staggering. United Nations estimates suggest gemstone revenues make up as much as 10% of all military spending each year. Civilian miners, squeezed onto marginal land, are often forced to sell their finds back to the junta's companies at a fraction of their true value. The regime's denials, claims of lawful operations and local employment, are contradicted by a mountain of evidence from international watchdogs and first-hand witnesses. For the generals, the ruby trade is a lifeline. For those at the bottom, it is a sentence to hardship, danger, and fear. The beauty of a pigeon blood ruby hides the violence that brought it to market. The true price is paid by the people of Mogok, whose labor and suffering remain buried beneath the shimmer of the world's most coveted gem. In Washington, the outcry over Myanmar's rubies reached a breaking point in 2008. The headlines were stark: forced labor, military crackdowns, and a gem trade fueling violence. Lawmakers, led by Congressman Tom Lantos, pressed for action. The result was the Tom Lantos Block Burmese Jade Act, a law that banned the import of all rubies and jadeite from Myanmar into the United States. The language was unambiguous: no Burmese stones, no exceptions. The aim was to cut off the military's cash flow at its source, to deny the regime the profits that kept its grip on power. For the first time, America's jewelry counters faced a hard stop. Customs officers received new orders. Shipments of rubies arriving from Myanmar were turned away at ports and airports. Importers scrambled to adjust. In the months after the law's passage, official U.S. imports of Burmese rubies dropped from tens of millions of dollars a year to nearly zero. Trade statistics showed a cliff. In 2007, the U.S. imported over $30 million in rubies and jade from Myanmar. By 2009, that number had collapsed to a fraction of a percent. Jewelers, auction houses, and retailers were suddenly on notice. The message was clear: these stones, legendary or not, were now off limits. Supporters of the ban spoke in moral terms. Tom Lantos, whose name the law bears, called the gems dripping with blood. On the House floor, lawmakers described a simple equation: starve the mines, starve the generals. The hope was that by removing the world's largest luxury market from the equation, the junta's war chest would shrink. For a moment, the plan seemed to work. The direct supply line was cut. American jewelers, eager to prove their ethics, began touting their compliance with the new law. Some companies even launched advertising campaigns promising conflict-free stones. The industry's leading trade association issued new guidelines, warning members to double-check sourcing and paperwork. For buyers, it felt like a turning point, a chance to enjoy beauty without guilt. Yet, even as the ban took hold, quiet warnings circulated among diplomats and trade experts. The demand for pigeon blood rubies had not disappeared. Myanmar's mines still churned, the generals still controlled the valley, and as the legal import door slammed shut, questions lingered about what might come next. For now, though, the numbers told a story of success. In showrooms and on Capitol Hill, there was a sense of relief, a belief that at last, the world's most coveted gem would no longer bankroll a regime built on violence. Inside the halls of Congress, the language of the 2008 ban was hammered out under intense scrutiny. The official text left no room for Burmese rubies or jadeite. On paper, the door was closed. But as the ink dried, the jewelry industry's top lobbyists were already searching for cracks. Behind closed doors, Trade association representatives pressed lawmakers and regulatory staff for definitions that would work in their favor. The phrase "processed elsewhere" became a focal point. If a stone was cut or polished in a third country, could it really still be considered Burmese? Industry lawyers argued that transformation abroad should erase the gem's tainted past. The result? A legal gray zone that would haunt enforcement for years. Emails from trade group consultants, later leaked by whistleblowers, showed a coordinated push to influence both lawmakers and the labs that certify gemstones. Some of the world's most respected gemological laboratories in Bangkok and Switzerland began to feel the pressure. Internal staff debated whether to list a stone's origin based on scientific analysis or simply the paperwork provided by exporters and wholesalers. One lab technician, frustrated by management's instructions, wrote, "If the documents say Thailand, we certify Thailand, no questions." The policy, quietly adopted by several labs, meant that a Burmese ruby recut and repackaged in Chanthaburi could suddenly receive a certificate of Thai origin. This loophole did not go unnoticed by those closest to the trade. A veteran lobbyist for a major U.S. jewelry retailer described the situation in frank terms. "We needed a way to keep the supply moving. The law left us with only one option: let the paperwork do the talking." Certification labs, facing demands from both clients and industry groups, became gatekeepers of legitimacy. The actual geology of the stone, the microscopic clues that could reveal its birthplace, was often ignored in favor of whatever story the documents told. With the third country clause now embedded in the system, a new pipeline opened. Gems smuggled out of Myanmar could be laundered into the legal market with little more than a new certificate and a change of address. The paperwork, not the science, became the final word. U.S. customs officers, bound by the language of the law, had little power to challenge a stone that arrived with all the right stamps. Even Homeland Security officials, in confidential memos, acknowledged the futility. If the paperwork says non-Burmese, we have no grounds to seize. The loophole was not a secret. Trade press articles, industry seminars, and even public statements from gem dealers hinted at the workaround. But for the consumer, the effect was invisible. The ban that once promised a clean break had become a sieve. The generals in Myanmar continued to profit, the black market flourished, and the luxury counters of America once again filled with stones whose true origins were lost in a maze of legal fictions. The law's weakness was not in its intent, but in the escape routes carved out by those with the most to lose. A ruby's journey from Mogok to a Fifth Avenue display case rarely follows a straight line. The process starts in the dark, winding borderlands between Myanmar and Thailand. Here, traffickers, some known by nicknames like Uncle Bird, coordinate teams of couriers who slip uncut stones through jungle trails and remote crossings at Mai Sat or Mai Sai. The risk is high, but so are the rewards. Bribes smooth the way at checkpoints, and by the time the gems reach Thai soil, their Burmese past is already fading into memory. In Chanthaburi, Thailand's gem capital, the stones enter the next phase, the wash. Workshops buzz with activity as rubies are sorted, recut, and polished. Recutting isn't just about beauty, it's a deliberate act. Each cut erases microscopic clues, the tiny mineral fingerprints that might reveal a stone's true birthplace. Some gems are blended with African or Vietnamese rubies, making them even harder to trace. Then comes the paperwork. Dealers prepare new certificates, listing the origin as Thai, or sometimes leaving it blank. Local labs, under pressure from clients and industry insiders, often accept the documents at face value. The final step is re-entry. Once relabeled, these stones are shipped out, sometimes through Singapore or Hong Kong free ports, where customs oversight is minimal. By the time the gems reach New York, Geneva, or Los Angeles, they carry a new identity. Even seasoned jewelers struggle to tell the difference. The entire chain, smuggle, wash, re-enter, runs with clockwork precision, exploiting every loophole and blind spot in the system. For traffickers like Uncle Bird, each stone that passes through his hands is another payday, another victory over a law that was supposed to stop him. In 2014, a team of Homeland Security and FBI agents launched a quiet operation in Manhattan's Diamond District. Their target, rubies that had slipped into the U.S. market under false identities. Acting on a tip, undercover agents arranged to buy a parcel of high-value stones, each accompanied by paperwork declaring origins far from Myanmar, some labeled as Thai, others as African. Forensic gemologists, brought in to analyze the stones, found telltale traces of Mogok's signature chromium and fluorescence. The stones, despite their new names and certificates, were unmistakably Burmese. The sting didn't end with the gems. Financial investigators traced the payment trail, following funds as they moved from New York dealers through a web of offshore accounts in Singapore and Dubai. Court filings later revealed that the proceeds, after looping through these havens, landed in accounts controlled by Myanmar's military-linked conglomerates. The money, laundered as carefully as the stones themselves, was routed back to the very regime the law was meant to starve. The seized rubies, valued in the millions, offered hard proof. The black market pipeline not only survived the U.S. ban, it flourished. Despite layers of forged documents and international transfers, the gems found their way into American jewelry cases, and the profits found their way back to the generals. For law enforcement, the case exposed the limits of paperwork and the reach of a trade that could cross borders, erase origins, and still bankroll oppression, one glittering stone at a time. In 2008, the United States banned Burmese rubies, aiming to cut off funding to Myanmar's military regime. Yet, as documented, less than 1% of rubies worldwide meet the rare Pigeon blood standard, and over 90% still originate from Myanmar's Mogok Valley. Official records confirm that after the ban, direct imports to the U.S. dropped sharply, but customs seizures and financial investigations show that these stones continued to reach American stores through laundering in third countries, such as Thailand. Despite evidence from the 2014 Manhattan ruby seizure linking funds back to military-controlled companies, the full scale of the trade, and the amount flowing to the junta, remains unknown, as much of the paperwork and ownership chains are hidden or classified. Today, the world's most coveted rubies still command record prices, while their true origins are often impossible to verify. The result? A policy intended to do good instead fueled a black market, leaving consumers and jewelers in the dark about what their purchases support.